watched Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, I wondered to myself, when's Bill Skarsgard going to show up? Surely this crusty old Count Orlok will drink enough blood that he will de-age and emerge from the shadows as Mr. Bill Skarsgard. I ended up being so engrossed in the film. It's weird wearing this costume and then acting like myself. Let me tell you. All right, so anyway, I was so engrossed in the movie that it was more of a curiosity that Bill Skarsgard never showed up. I was like, that's weird. And I checked, and he's still listed as playing Count Orlok. But I was like, you know what? Maybe he dropped out at the last minute. They kept it hush-hush, and they got some little-known European theater actor to step in and play the role instead. So I emailed publicity, and they said, oh no, that's Bill Skarsgard as Count Orlok. Oh my goodness! Knock me over with a feather, a black Victorian raven feather. Move over, Jared Leto. Move over, Colin Farrell. This is a transformation so shocking. Not only do I have trouble believing it, but I don't understand what the point of it is. All right, so let's discuss. I can see Jared Leto and Colin Farrell at the soul of their respective performances. Like, you don't know it's them, but you do. I don't see Skarsgard here at all. Even once you tell me it's Bill Skarsgard, I'm like, where? I don't see him anywhere. The performance is incredibly strong, not just visually, but also physically and vocally. Skarsgard moves and sounds like an old man. You know, I was wondering when I was watching if maybe it was him, but I was like, no, that can't be him. But it is. He doesn't seem like a young man pretending to be old. He seems like an actual old man. I still haven't decided how I feel about it, and I'll be curious to hear your reaction as well. It's a neat trick, to be sure, but perhaps it's too good of a trick, as it doesn't seem like a trick was done at all. Like, you know, it's like if you tell someone you did a trick to them like a few days later, you're like, hey, remember dinner a couple of days ago? Well, I did a neat magic trick, and and you're like, so what? I don't understand. What? Right? Like, it's hard for me to even credit Bill Skarsgard with the performance, because doesn't an artist want to have a signature? Like, to get some credit for it? And some of you might be like, oh, but Grace, he's so disappearing into the role. But to what end? You know, like, I don't think it helps the film. In fact, the character, this Orlok blends it fits Nosferatu, this version of Nosferatu so well, he blends into the movie. Like, he doesn't even seem like a standout character. He almost seems like a part of the production design in many ways. And so maybe that's another element as well. And Bill Skarsgard's doing very little publicity for the film. But you know what? I think that's okay. I don't think that Robert Eggers' Nosferatu even needs Bill Skarsgard. In fact, it might be better off without him, with the string of recent flops that he's had. And the film doesn't need any tricks, because what's so great about the film, in my opinion, what I find so appealing about it, is that it's just so incredibly well done from a craftsmanship perspective. The more I think about the film, actually, the more I like it. Like, I wasn't sure how I felt about it when I first saw it, but it's just haunted me, like in the most beautiful way. Also, technically, it is a Christmas movie. There is a scene with a Christmas tree in it, which I thought was amusing. And also, with horror enjoying quite the renaissance right now, and it's the fandom at an all-time high, I think there are quite a few people who will absolutely love watching this movie on Christmas Day. It's kind of actually a little bit of a neat trick. And of course, it'll be in theaters after that as well. I definitely recommend seeing it in theaters. An industry friend of mine told me that despite his lukewarm box office track record, Robert Eggers was actually given $50 million to make this film. Who would give Robert Eggers $50 million? But you know what? I'm so glad they did, because the result is glorious. And it's all on screen. That Eggers, he didn't even spend any money for a cast. It's funny because it's true. He could have gotten much better actors with that budget. I mean, Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult are fine, but as I watched the film, again, in all its dark glory, I mean, look, it inspired me to dress up like this. I thought to myself, how many more people might see the film if, say, it starred Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney, who I actually think would have been quite well cast here. Really, there are a number of actors who could have helped to sell tickets for this beyond the hardcore horror fandom that will go and see it no matter what. And I worry about Hoult's box office curse. And also, Depp's daughter hasn't fared much better either so far. You know who really helps the film? Aaron Taylor Johnson. I couldn't believe it myself. I was like, wow, this cast is so meh that Aaron Taylor Johnson is the prince of it. Although maybe he's on his way up. Maybe this is it. It's finally going to happen for him. But in a sea of bleakness, his character is supposed to be a beacon of normalcy, of good light and cheer. He's the cousin Fred of this movie, and he does a wonderful job with it. On that note, let's talk A Christmas Carol. So interestingly, while of course the original film, the 1922 film, German film, is a take on Dracula, this movie reminds me quite a bit of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Another reason to release it for Christmas. Now, I looked up when these two stories were written. Isn't this amazing? This I find very interesting. And don't you love it when a movie starts you on this streak of inquiry? You're like, oh, to the internets, let's do the research. So Dracula was written in 1897, and A Christmas Carol was written earlier, 54 years earlier in 1843. How interesting is it that A Christmas Carol predates the story of Dracula? So Nosferatu, the film, takes place in Germany as a nod to the 1922 film, but it feels like not only the Victorian era, but specifically Victorian England. And everybody has British accents, even though they're supposed to be in Germany. I wasn't complaining. It reminded me of A Christmas Carol. The sets are insane. Insane! Oh, they're so gorgeous. There's one sequence where Hoult goes to work, and it's hard to believe what you're seeing, especially in a film from Robert Eggers. Again, you're like, who gave Robert Eggers so much money? Thank you! As Hoult navigates the busy streets, you're just like, look at that set. Look at that set. Oh my God, did you build this? Is this practical? This is amazing. I think not just horror fans will be delighted, but goth fans and fans of cinema. I mean, it's just incredible. And the film is just done with such passion, care, and artistry. It is an absolute delight. Oh, it was just so fun to see a film that had this level of care. So often when we see films today, we lament that the films don't quite go far enough. They're close, but not quite there when it comes to giving us what we want. Coming across as more of a tease, an echo of what we'd hoped to get when we bought a ticket. Not this Nosferatu. This is a real Haunted Mansion kind of movie. I mean, it gives you exactly what you want and even more. Robert Eggers' craftsmanship as a filmmaker is on par with old world craftsmanship, which I also think gives the film this timeless feel. From not only filmmaking to, I think, just craftsmanship in general, the way it used to exist all over the world before, in so many areas, in every area, before machines and technology drained out creativity in favor of productivity. We even see that in Hollywood as it becomes more driven by the stock market and technology. It's lost a lot of its creativity and nuance. So it's so great to see that return here. When I first heard that Nosferatu was going to try and be an awards film, I chuckled to myself. That's ridiculous. But now that I've seen it, I think it could definitely give Wicked and Dune a real challenge in the craft categories. And also, I think it has a very strong shot at cinematography. Acting categories, that's a little bit harder. Horror has historically had a very hard time getting recognized during award season, something that horror fans are always frustrated by, but particularly this year with so many fantastic horror films. The Substance is currently the only film that's really been able to break through. Maybe Nosferatu will as well. In fact, only 6 horror films have ever been nominated for Best Picture. The Exorcist, Jaws, The Sixth Sense, Black Swan, and Get Out and Silence of the Lambs. A little loose on the horror category there. And some might argue that Shape of Water is a horror film. I wouldn't really argue that, but it did win, so I guess the horror genre will take it. Is Nosferatu at the level of these movies? To be totally honest with you, I think the cast brings it down. It has a real B-movie level cast. I think Eggers would have been better off going with unknowns rather than the cast that he has here. And to be honest, it's not totally like something like a game changer, but what's so great about it is that it's an old idea done right. It just is just the craft, again, it's like craftsmanship, and that it just so does give you what you want. You're like, now that's a horror movie. That is a Victorian goth horror movie. That might not be for everybody, but it sure is for me, and so I particularly enjoyed it. It is one of my favorite movies of the year. I don't know how many other people in Hollywood will agree with me or how many fans will agree with me, but I really liked it. The real star here, in my opinion, is Mr. Robert Eggers. His work here is an absolute delight. Several sequences are just mesmerizing. My favorite by far is the carriage sequence. You'll know it when you see it. If I were Kevin Feige, I would be doop, 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 or emailing him right away to get him to be directing Blade. But even better, if I were an enterprising producer, this man should be definitely adapting Alan Moore's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. A good adaptation, thank you very much, because Eggers' work reminds me so much, strikingly so, of Moore's entire legacy of work, but particularly League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The dark literature subject matter, the Victorian bodice ripping. Like Moore, Eggers goes slightly further than Victorian spicy stories, but he does do a lot of alluding, which allows the audience's imagination to fill in the blanks, from the spicy stuff to the scary stuff. And with such intricate storytelling, when you layer imagination on top of that, it's a very potent combination. And I think that's one of the reasons that you'll find yourself haunted by this film. It really sticks with you. By the way, the film is rated R. I believe it even pushes the boundaries of an R rating much the way that HBO does. So parents, I don't know. My parents used to take me to a lot of adult films when I was growing up. So you might be tempted to take someone to see Nosferatu who's under 17. Just take the R rating very seriously. My parents used to have me cover my eyes for certain parts of the film, and I think you could do that here and you'd be fine. And again, it's a very naughty movie, but I do have to point out there was one thing about it that made me just a little bit uncomfortable. The film has a very antiquated and disturbing idea of what constitutes consent. I want to make it clear, because I don't think the movie makes it clear enough, that if someone consents only because they're under threat, then that's not really consent. So that was my one issue with the film. I also didn't love how the female storyline concluded, but it's very Victorian, so it fits with the film. The movie is also surprisingly shocking, which therefore also makes it funny. My audience laughed out loud a couple of times, not at the movie, but because it was just so out there and bizarre. And I appreciated how far it was willing to go in terms of, really delivering that Victorian horror film. It was very gross and disgusting at points as well. It got pretty gross. I had to look away a few times. So how is the acting? Nicholas Hoult is certainly a fine actor. I've long enjoyed his work, but it seems he has an acquired taste. No matter how good the film that he's in, and he's been in a number of fantastic films, if he's in it, it tends not to do very well. So that makes me a little nervous for this movie. And I guess it doesn't help that as I watched this movie, I felt that he was almost a placeholder for a better actor. They're like, it was almost like a proof of concept. And they're like, but we'll put somebody else in this role, like Robert Pattinson from Eggers' The Lighthouse, or Keanu Reeves from Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, all more compelling choices. Same with Lily Rose Depp. Her role is particularly risque, and she certainly gives the role her all. Also, it has an exorcism element to some of her sequences, which she also does a nice job with. But she doesn't bring a lot to the role beyond being really game to execute these sequences. Just like Hoult, she's fine, but they both feel like placeholders for better choices. Opposite these two, Aaron Taylor Johnson really shines. He's a jolt of lightning. He just really does a lot for the film. I think he was fantastic. Emma Corrin, hot off of Deadpool and Wolverine, I was like, Emma Corrin! She plays Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife in the film. It's a small role. She's fine also, but I think she particularly doesn't fit the Victorian setting. Certainly not the wife of a wealthy man of that period with her more waif physicality. Willem Dafoe, she's like a very modern casting of a Victorian character. Willem Dafoe chews scenery quite well, as he always does, and he's been in a number of Eggers films. And Ralph Ineson, isn't he Galactus actually? Yes, that's true, I think. He does very nice work as a prominent physician. I like the work that he did. But another real standout here is Mr. Simon McBurney. He does some of the weirdest, most twisted things I've ever seen in a movie, which totally fit his character. He was an incredible Victorian madman. Probably the best I've ever seen in a film or television show. He was disgusting, and he went for it, and it was fantastic. I love classic horror. I love A Christmas Carol, many of the works of Alan Moore, and of course, classic film, not just classic horror. So that's an amazing combination for me. I don't know if it's going to appeal to everybody, but if that sounds like you would be into it as well, then you will be very happy. I mean, again, it's a fantastic Haunted Mansion film. And, because of those Christmas Carol elements and the Victorian elements, it does seem to me, interestingly, more Christmas than Halloween. Isn't that interesting? I'd be curious to know why you think it maybe feels a little bit more Christmassy than Halloween-y. All right, so that's my non-spoiler review of Nosferatu, hitting theaters on Christmas Day. Again, you don't have to see it on Christmas Day. That's not for everybody, but I do, again, as I said, think it's worth catching in theaters. It's a proper film. You should see it in a proper theater. All right, so that's my review. Share your own thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.